Out?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome everybody to the symposium on Imagined Geographies. I'm Julian Blow. I'm the new Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation at UEA. I've been in post now 4 months, and I'm trying to get to know the research, the good research going on at UEA, and it was obvious to me before I came that this was an area of strength. And Susan has prepared a nice little introduction to me that goes over actually some of the evidence that I had, that I already knew about the strengths in this area. I'd like to say maybe at the outset, I really want to get to know the research areas, the strong research areas at UEA. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to stay for the symposium, but I really would like, in future to sit in on some sessions and, meet you and find out what's going on. But unfortunately, that's going to have to be for the future. So to the introduction. So this is one of the 3 Imagined Geographies symposiums to be held at UEA this year, and the first time researchers in our units of assessment and schools have collaborated in exploring shared research interests. These Imagined Geographies events are collaborations between the New Area Studies Research Centre, the East Centre History, and the School of Global Developments. 2 later events will be organised on Eastern Europe in February, led by Francis King, and on Global Development in May, led by Maria Abranches. This event is led by the New Area Studies Research Centre, and the growth of area studies at UEA has been remarkable. From REF 2014 to REF 2021, the number of colleagues returned to the Area Studies UOA grew 228%, so more than doubled from 14 to 46. And REF 2021 results in area studies were absolutely excellent, and UEA ranked 5th nationally in this area, and ranked 4th in terms of research power. So that's the product of multiplying your quality versus the number of people that you submit. So clearly a major player in the UK in this area, and so this recognises both our national and international standard. And we should point out that we were ahead of both, or you were. We is me taking credit for stuff that that was done before I came here, doing better than both Oxford and Cambridge and many other Russell institutions. So world leading output at 44%, impact at 62% 4-star, and environment 72% 4-star. The environment bit is something I'm very keen on, I should say, because across the piece, UEA was notably weak on research environment. And what I think that represents, having asked around, is a real fragmentation of research at UEA. It's sort of somehow research has been left just to fend for itself. And what that means is there are some very strong areas, because there are some strong research leaders, probably here in the room today, who've kept that research culture and that research environment very strong. One thing I want to do is to learn from the best groupings and make sure that best practice is then extended across all of UEA. Area studies colleagues are drawn from across humanities and social sciences, politics, philosophy and area studies, media, languages and communications, history and art history, literature, drama and creative writing, the Sainsbury Research Unit and global development. And again, that, talking about the sort of silo nature of research at UEA, that is really, this is music to my ears, and this is something that, again, we should be seeing across the piece. UEA has been at the forefront of the revival of the field, pushing out boundaries in theory, landmark publications, agenda-setting colloquia, innovative impact projects, and the creation of an online open access journal, New Area Studies. This has positioned us at the center of a global conversation about the future of area studies, attracting prominent interlocutors from around the globe and gaining international acclaim for our distinctive interdisciplinary style. Previous seminars and conferences on constructing new area studies can be found on our New Area Studies Research Centre website, and it's also a YouTube channel. Our Director of Area Studies, Susan Hodgett, is General Editor of the first book series on New Area Studies launched by Routledge. Her 2018 book, Necessary Travel, New Area Studies in Canada in Comparative Perspective, sets the agenda for New Area Studies theory. And a forthcoming book with Professor Patrick James from the University of Southern California will chart the future of area studies post-pandemic. Our New Area Studies Research Centre was formally launched yesterday. Congratulations. It exists in the AHB building, floor 2. So that's one floor up from where my office is. So you shouldn't be strangers to me. Say hello if you meet me in the corridor. The first panel at the symposium yesterday illustrated how colleagues are collaborating on the infinite space of imagined geographies, American Studies in the Age of New Area Studies. The New Area Studies Research Centre, NASRC, doesn't UEA love abbreviations, supports other priority areas for this unit of assessment, growing our open access New Area Studies journal, co-edited by Tom Smith, supporting research outputs, improving grant capture, raising reputations, improving the research environment for researchers here and beyond. This is a research unit with big ambition and a wide horizon, leading the reconstruction of the discipline globally. We welcome collaborators to this symposium, those in the room and those online. We look forward at UEA to continue to contribute new ideas and to work together across our research centres in leading the field of area studies through the forthcoming years. So have a good symposium. As I said, I'm sorry I can't take part in it, but please, contact me. I want to get to know researchers. I want to know your ideas, what you think UEA should be doing, what you think I should be doing for you. So have a good day.
Thank you. Oh, hang on. There we go. That's the feedback. Issue sorted, hopefully. Everyone, welcome to day 2 of Imagined Geographies. And we're going to be jumping straight in with our first panel, revealing arts, archives and areas. So we have 4 presentations today. And we're going to be kicking things off with Martina Morabito from the Universities of Bologna and Siena, who's going to be talking about Dreaming the Caucasus, a montage of myth, maps and memory. So welcome, Martina. I'll just get your presentation up. We've got a prezi, everyone. Okay, over to you.
Good morning. In this 15 minutes, I will try to travel through a landscape of dreams. I hope you won't fall asleep. A landscape made up of films, photographs, literary texts, and maps. And my aim is to show that the geographical concrete space we are going to talk about, that is the Caucasus, has often been distorted by the European gaze in vague and dreamlike visions. It was, and maybe still is, because my latest example is dated 2016, a land that has been colonized and orientalized due to cause disorientation. So let's start with our first dream. And today I'm connecting the concept of imagined geography to the dreaming process. So I will use some Freudian ideas and vocabulary. And to this first dream, the oniric technique of displacement could be applied. So displacement is a defense mechanism in which the real element, that is the Caucasus, is altered to reduce its negative, uncanny foreign impact. So to be more precise, in this first exemplification, the Caucasus has been seen as India, so quite strange. And in one of the stories of the novel *The Emigrants* by Sebald, the Caucasus appears without any justification, suggesting the border, the liminal border line between Europe and Asia, but also between the world of logic, linearity, on the one hand, and that of irrational, wild impulses on the other. So the protagonist of Sebald's story, Dr. Selwyn, is hosting the narrator and his wife. And one evening, he shows them through a projector some slides from an old trip to Crete, and I'm quoting. We sat looking at this picture for a long time in silence too, so long that the glass in the slide shattered and a dark crack fissured across the screen. That view of the Lassithi Plateau, held so long till it shattered, made a deep impression on me at the time, yet it later vanished from my mind almost completely. And as Michaud notes, human memory is similar to a cinematic process, where fragments of different films are stored and resurface like fleeting shadows. So years later, that same photographic image reappears into a moving cinematic image, while the narrator is watching one film by Herzog, and in particular this scene we are watching now. And I'm quoting Sebald again. It was not until a few years afterwards that he returned to me in a London cinema, as I followed a conversation between Caspar Hauser and his teacher. And Caspar was distinguishing for the first time between dream and reality, beginning his account with the words, "I was in a dream, and in my dream I saw the Caucasus." And the camera then moved from right to left in a sweeping arc, offering a panoramic view of plateau ranged by mountains, a plateau with a distinctly Indian look to it. The cap reminded me of sails of those wind pumps of Lassithi. So the enigma of Caspar Hauser tells the story of a young man who has been locked away in total isolation since his very birth. And once he comes into contact with society, he tries to learn the rules of everyday life. And in this scene, we are witnessing his dream, but this vision of the Caucasus does not correspond to the real Caucasus at all. As Sebald notes, it resembles India or some vaguely defined exotic place. So we can call it a Freudian displacement. And interestingly enough, this construction of an Indian Caucasus also appears in Russian literature from the late 18th century and early 19th century in writers as Derzhavin and Pushkin. And in their texts, the Caucasus and India are intertwined, so blurred together in poetry and dreams. And we have to say that this imagined geography started from the era of Alexander the Great, a period in which Western geographical imagination developed the idea of an Indian Caucasus. Because it was believed that the Caucasus, from which the Ganges River was thought to originate, extended from the Black Sea all the way to India. So as maybe you can see from this map. And so this idea was tied not only to imperial expeditions, but also to expansionism, because the Caucasus can be seen as a kind of mobile frontier, always moving forward. So Kaspar's dreamlike vision comes from this past, from this remote past, and has roots both in geopolitics and also in a sort of collective mythical imagination. Our second dream is a double one and is made up of two distinct events, recalling childhood memories, and are narrated by two women. The first one from the Russian Empire and the second from the Soviet Union. The realm of their childhood is, to use again a Freudian vocabulary, condensated in the specific Caucasian space, and confirms the dimension of unreality of the land. So let's start from the first woman, a Russian medium, traveler passionate about India, Yelena Petrovna Gann, known as Helena Blavatsky. She was the founder of the Theosophical Society in New York, and she was born in Yekaterinoslav in 1831 and spent several years of her youth in the Caucasus. And it was precisely in Tbilisi that her magical powers first manifested. So during the 1870s, she was traveling through the US, where she demonstrated her abilities. And in a report she wrote for the Daily Graphic, she detailed 120 visions of spirits with the photographs also. And the first figure she saw was a Georgian boy dressed in historical Caucasian costume, whose image soon appeared in the page of the newspaper. And she said, I recognized him and asked him questions in Georgian about our childhood. He understood me and responded at my request, also in his mother tongue, to play a Circassian dance. He immediately complied, playing a guitar. So this, and she also added the transcription of the music, so real materials. We are talking about ghosts and visions. And this attention to the ethnographic accuracy, to the typical detail, to the traditional melodies and gestures, is accompanied by a fascination with an other world, that is a geographical elsewhere and also a supernatural one, an exotic that becomes esoteric. So this immaterial space has its roots in the imaginary and poetic Caucasus outlined so far, which in the second half of the 19th century began to merge with ethnographic practices describing the national types of the Russian Empire. But this highly stereotyped Caucasus, presented also in a performative dimension, so singing and dancing in front of an audience, is connected also to memory and childhood, as Blavatskaya underlines his intimacy with the spirit. And the second woman dreaming about the Caucasus of her youth is the contemporary writer Katya Petrovskaya, who recently composed a book who juxtaposes photographs to the descriptions of these photographs. And one of them, this one, depicts a lady in a Caucasian landscape. And this photograph is a concrete material, real document, but Katya Petrovskaya describes it again as a dream, and I'm quoting. I don't know if an unknown babushka has ever appeared to you at night in a dream. I don't know if you want to answer. I had the pleasure of one appearing to me. I dreamt of her, of this babushka, floating over the Caucasus mountains. Though I had previously seen hundreds of more evocative photos of more beautiful people or more interesting historical events. And in the final sentence of this brief chapter devoted to this Caucasian lady, Petrovskaya adds other oniric levels. This photo captures, she writes, 3 dreams. One of mine, one of a child in a hospital, because the lady worked as a nurse in a hospital, and one of the woman herself, now soaring in the heavenly lift. And finally, to conclude, this panoramic gaze of the imagined geography of the Caucasus, I will briefly focus on a dramatic representation, another Freudian technique of a dream, this time with roots in classical mythology. So the dramatic representation is just the construction of a story to be told with a development. And this story is a Soviet variation on the theme of the imaginary Caucasus. And its reformulation of the territory into a place of abundance. So this is the first Georgian animated short film, as well also the first cinematic reworking of a Greek myth in Russia. The title is Argonauti, filmed in 1936. This is the ending, by a Georgian director, Vladimir Mudjire. And this film narrates in very simple and didactic visual language, also in a pseudo-mythological key, the transformation of the Caucasus, of a marshy region, into an Edenic land where giant fruits grow, a paradise inhabited by a new Soviet incarnation of Adam and Eve, or Jason and Medea. So from a dream fantasy, the Caucasus transforms itself, keeping its roots in the Greek myth into a land of utopia, achievable in the Soviet future. And so this final reformulation is a description of an unseen place because it refers to the distant Greek mythical past, very far from contemporary eyes of the Soviet reality. But also it seeks to recover that mythical past and project it into the future. So to conclude, displacement, condensation, and dramatic representation worked as methodological tools to read and maybe to dismantle the imagined dimension of the Caucasus, a mountain range separating Europe from Asia, but also the self with all its desires from the other who often has no voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so for our second paper, we are sticking to maps, but we are pivoting online. So Dorothea, are you there?
I am.
Excellent. Are you?
Can you hear me?
We can. Yeah. You ready to start sharing?
Yes, I will.
Fabulous. Thank you. So our second speaker is Dorothea Hutterer, LMU München, Germany. And she's going to be speaking about hand-painted maps as imagined geographies, landscape narratives from past to present. We know it works because we've tested it. So. Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Over to you.
So, I hope you can see the slides.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so dear participants of the conference on Imagined Geographies from Past to Future, thanks for inviting me and having me online. I'd love to be there, but no chance. As a linguist and historian, I would like to give you an insight into my research work, in particular the cartographic history of the environment, which I devoted myself to during my doctorate in the doctoral program of the Rachel Carson Center at the LMU in Munich. And I have chosen hand-painted maps as imagined geographies, landscape narratives from past to present as the topic. My talk today is divided into two themes. First, the creation of hand-drawn maps in the early modern period will be examined. Here, the interaction of archival tradition in writing and images with the actors involved will be shown. In addition to this historical perspective, a second thematic complex will address today's cultural landscape and the path into the field. This should make it clear that the map as a social construct almost intends an actor-related approach, both historically and today. People with a wide range of functions and professions are involved in its creation, and they explore the space together. The resulting map can also be most easily compared with today's cultural landscape by involving people who knew the area. There's one central question here. So, how do people from diverse backgrounds think, talk about, and interact with landscapes during the map-making process? This helps us to understand the way from imagining landscapes to the final image of a landscape as a map. The perception of space varies due to the social role of the involved people. Especially the imagination and profession of the painter leads to a finalization of an imagined landscape. Ultimately, the finished map contains different contextual levels, which are shaped by the process of developing the information. In addition to the context of creation, these are both the spatial and the written context. Multiple levels of information complement each other through activity in the space to create an overall picture that goes beyond basic information gathering about the content to be presented, the space, and the agreed form. The work of the commission and its result, the map, serve as a link and common communication level between residents and the sovereign. I designed the following table to bring together the several actors and the work steps in the map production process. Some of them are written, others are oral processes, mostly a mixture of both. Finally, it's all about design, format, and color schemes, and additional to the written and oral processes comes the visual aspect. With regards to the space category, land use is a particular interest. The decisive factors are the resources in the soil, geomorphological structures such as bodies of water, slope edges and mountains, and ultimately the vegetation with a rough division into fields, grassland, and forest. In this way, tendencies in cartographic professionalization can be shown as well as possible areas of conflict. You'll see that later on. I have many examples with me. The changing perspective on the landscape and its representation, therefore, plays a significant role. In addition to the spatial conditions, the actors act as addressees for the corresponding levels of representation of the maps. The landscape itself, with all its natural spatial conditions, serves as the basis. Many areas of conflict arise from the intervention in the landscape and the divergent interests of local residents in terms of use. This is where the actual reason for creating the maps comes into play. Additional spatial information can only be depicted by bringing in commissions. Ultimately, boundaries are noted and spatial sovereignty affiliations are added to clarify claims to power and use. Length measurement informations and cardinal directions and explanatory legends are the key differences that turn a pure illustration into a cartographic source. On the chart, I try to bring together the possible levels of representation and interpretation through the map images. The 4 points in the column on the left can be analyzed on maps and shows several levels of representation. And representation itself is a fundamental function of maps. As examples, I selected different types of maps that refer to the spatial selection as large and small scale images, different land use that causes conflicts, and the legal binding foundation. Maps with actors in the landscapes are very rare. Map making is a social process that involves witnesses, experts, and officials, but the result has to look representative. Maybe that's a matter to keep the people out of the image, to make it more neutral. So the first example, you can see a big central river, on the left side, meadows, willows, and the forests, path going through, and you can also see a few lines. On the left-hand side, a big red one goes around the fields. In the middle, a blue one, a smaller one, where a few trees are cutted, and around the forest, a green one. That's not natural borders. That's the interaction of people while walking through the landscape. So that's a commission work. First they went the red line, then the blue one, and then the yellow one. So it's a mixture of the landscape itself and the interaction in the landscape. The next example, a river again, but here that map is up to 3 meters long, and the focus is only on the river itself. So the landscape in between is totally left out and not of interest. Another river map I have here. Here the riverbed is sort of a symmetric center. You can see a typical alpine region, so hills left and right hand side of the river. And if you, for example, put it in the middle of a table, so it's a doubled upside down perspective. So I just tried it to show you what I mean. So it doesn't matter from which side you look at it. It makes sense. Now I want you to focus on that picture. On the left-hand side, there's a small dark line. That's a ridge where the actual river and the mill stream is divided. You can see the mills up left there, and it looks quite similar until today. I made a picture out of it when I was walking out there in 2023. So it's a very long duration over not just decades, but centuries. That was the point when it was created to the land use conflict. How did it work when you get water off the actual river? Does it still work? Yes, it did. You can see it obviously. Another point I have here, one of the oldest maps from the 16th century I used for today. It's a typical resource conflict. So cutted trees across the border. So the image of nature as well as the image of power, and just a few inscriptions on it. So just the landscape is speaking for itself. In comparison to that one, it's similar to the large scale one with the river maps from before, but the focus is here on a border. It's the red line and the blue one, a black one. Sometimes they're divided, sometimes they're together. It's very schematic, loads of references and text, the orientation windows down there. You have the heraldic symbols to clear the vision out. So that's a very schematic one in comparison to the one we saw before. On that example, I zoomed in a map from the 1780s. Again, the focus on the borders. So here we have a land use and borderscapes images next to each other. You can see the houses, the trees next to the houses, typical orchards, fences, hedges, boundary stones, and the numbers next to it. So the stones are numbered. Maybe you can figure out the 9 and the 10. When they built the streets in the 1970s, they put the stones back, but they switched the, so it's not 8, 9, 10, 11 now, but 8, 10, 9, 11. So here on the left-hand side, the stone number 9, you can see the number. It's next to a ditch, and it's on the same spot where the 10 had actually been. Something like that happens quite regularly. And I have another granite stone with a pyramid roof, and that seems to be a very fashionable thing to make stones in the 17th century. That picture here is one of my favorites on the left-hand side. I just call him my camouflage stone. You can see him, I hope. That's a very nice boundary stone out of limestone, but not granite. That's why it looks a little harmed. It's first mentioned in 1614, so less representative and mostly forgotten on many of these borders. But to figure out where the actual borders are, you just need sometimes, it's easier to figure out the oak and the beech trees planted on purpose next to these stones or actually along the borders. So that works out quite well. And sometimes you can find the stones on the maps, but not the trees, but the trees are here until now. That's why I have that example here. It's about imagined landscape and non-representation on maps. So the ditches in the landscapes are man-made borders, but many of them are not on the maps because it was too obviously that it is a border. So no one painted it on the map historically in the early modern period. Then, because now we had mostly dispute maps, here I have a typical economic example. So typical private-owned estate maps with several fancy shaped forests and fields on it. I picked out one example. I was out there together with the Duke, and we figured out in the landscape itself that the white line in the middle of the old map is not a street or something like that, it's a ditch. You can see it on the photo on the right-hand side. So you really have to go out there to figure out what a line on a map means in the landscape itself. What you can also see on the photo is the terrace, so a geomorphological and obvious terrace built here, and that's not part of the owned land of the Duke, so it's not on there. The last example I want to show you is that one. It's from the first official land measurement from 1808 to 1864. It's called Uraufnahme in Bavaria. And there, sometimes you have a nice border stone and you can see, okay, it's from 1725. Maybe you can go there and find a nice boundary stone. But due to my knowledge and reading skills of landscape, I really figured out that I can find a much older stone from around 1600 as the same space. And I did. And I have to apologize for that picture. But as a Bavarian girl, it's sometimes need a beer if it's working out quite well. And that comes to my final pictures. So what's to do with all these impressions and of my results? Obviously, it's sharing. So boundary hiking tours I'm doing for almost 15 years now. You can see sometimes 150 to 200 people joining my tours. I want to share the knowledge and my skills to understand how landscape is built during the times. In the 1980s, there was a trend in our area to tell nobody, for example, where these boundary stones are, that they are not getting destroyed. I do it the other way around. If everybody who walks by do know that there's a stone, they can say, okay, wow, something went wrong, it's gone, where is it? And then they are high alert if something happens to them. That's quite easier to protect them the more people knew what is going on. Some people say what I'm doing there is very semi-academic, but it's nothing about my academic career. That's what I'm doing in my private sphere, because I want people to really understand what's going on. But it's also part of my research, because for understanding conflicts on land use until now, so for example, think about new infrastructures that should be built, like bypass roads and things like that. It's all about understanding how the landscape is built, and it's a communication process. So we need similar communication processes of locals and experts today as we needed when we were creating the maps due to land use conflicts in history. So the historical understanding of landscape itself and the social processes of shaping it helps until now. So thank you very much for your attention.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Dorothea. Okay, so we are back in the room. And next up, I'd like to welcome Amani Maihoub. Universidade Católica Portuguesa-Lisbon, and the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. And she's going to be speaking about Pan-Yugoslav Radical Imaginations, the Nomad Dance Academy and Kooperativa, regional platform for culture. Thank you. Let me find your presentation. There we go. Over to you. Thank you.
Good morning. In this presentation, I examine two grassroots collaborative platforms with a strong commitment to nurturing cross-border regional cooperation on skills, training, and knowledge transfer in the cultural occupations across the region of the former Yugoslavia. These are the Nomad Dance Academy and Kooperativa, regional platform for culture. The circumstances surrounding the dissolution of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia and the ongoing simultaneous integration and disintegration processes across a multitude of public engagement and knowledge flow networks are pertinent to my discussion of what is construed here as regional solidarity networks. As you know, the 90s of the last century witnessed the outbreak of the Yugoslav wars, the rise of religious and ethnic nationalism, and the unfolding of a geography of broken bonds and degeneration, a time of political, economic, social, and moral crises in the Balkans. The common geocultural space that the former Yugoslav countries once shared has been broken in a series of pernicious conflicts, which resulted in the establishment of a new nation states and the EU membership negotiations. I contend that these two contemporary performing arts and cultural policy and management cooperation platforms are but one strategy for appropriating the disrupted biography of a shared past into the culture of dissidence of the independent arts and culture sector today. Now, to achieve this and to reflect a little bit on one of yesterday's presentations and discussions, I take the multidimensional and pluralistic perspective of new regionalism as my point of departure to place the emphasis on the manifold and contingent processes of region formation that have produced and reproduced the former Yugoslavia. New regionalism, as studied in international political economy, informs my approach to locating the political significance of these two cooperative enterprises in contemporary arts production and the creative industry. But my unique contribution here, because I don't come from international political economy, I do cultural studies, is incorporating this theory from international political economy into a cultural studies analytical framework. Moreover, I have coined the term Pan-Yugoslav Radical Imaginations to fulfill the need to consider multi-actor network ties throughout the wider Balkan regions within an interdisciplinary lens. I'll give a bit of background on both, brief background on both initiatives, and then I will bring them together in one discussion. To bring to fruition their vision for strengthening and professionalizing contemporary dance in the Balkans, a conglomeration of independent cultural organizations and dance collectives in 6 countries. So that would be Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, North Macedonia, as well as Bulgaria. So sometimes the borders are a bit stretched here, which we can discuss later. Founded the Nomad Dance Academy in 2005. Specifically, the term independent here is, I use it to designate their organic structure and entrepreneurial orientation, or how they operate to execute their goals. So these are voluntary, self-created associations with a horizontal organizational structure that are independent of the state and other public or private entities in their financial and managerial decision-making. The Nomad Dance Academy was conceived as a Balkan-wide dance network for artists, producers, and managers, and was established on flexible and informal terms among friends and collaborators who sought regional partnerships through various small-scale activities. Efforts were focused on fostering educational partnerships and facilitating regional and international mobility schemes. Periods abroad consisted in training courses and study visits. Each partner organization provided a space for learning and teaching, and in a few instances covered the travel and accommodation expenses of participating students and mentors. This paved the way for the Nomad Dance Academy educational program, where nomads or itinerant participants attended various workshops in multiple cities, and emerging young dancers and choreographers enjoyed the opportunity to live, work, and travel together. At a time when post-conflict governments were prepared to harness the arts, culture, and education in the construction and reification of ethno-national belonging, the Nomad Dance Academy served as a bottom-up, self-organized platform for collaboration, whose goal was to change the conversation about the role and value of creativity and culture in explaining the past, examining the present, and envisioning the future in the Balkans. It covered a wide range of activities, including dance education and its promotion, choreographic research and production, outreach and audience development, community engagement and social inclusion, and regional cooperation and international networking. For the founders of the Nomad Dance Academy, the term Balkans encompasses more than its geographical, geopolitical referent. What interests them is how the historical, cultural, and often even family ties the people of the Balkans share translate into contemporary creative practice. As regards the governance and management of the Nomad Dance Academy, the horizontal organizational structure and decentralized decision-making ensures that the information flows as intended and that feedback mechanisms are triggered. Now, several offshoot programs have been developed since its inception, such as the Nomad Dance Institute and the Nomad Dance Advocates. Long-term goals include fostering the development of sustainable mechanisms for regional cooperation and creating a positive environment in the Balkans where contemporary performing arts can survive and thrive. Essentially, the Nomad Dance Academy was conceptualized as a springboard for advocacy and policy influencing work. Its members have devised progressive, emancipatory strategies appropriate for their time and unique geocultural context. Deep-seated political divisions, border disputes, and governance challenges within and between their countries call out for their collective knowledge, thought, and praxis. Broadly defined, these strategies constitute grassroots pathways for challenging ethno-nationalist populism in the context of neoliberal governmentality in the contemporary Balkans. Similarly, 22 independent cultural organizations from Bosnia, Montenegro, Croatia, Kosovo, North Macedonia, Slovenia, and Serbia jointly founded the non-governmental, non-profit, and non-party Cooperativa Regional Platform for Culture, which was formally registered in Zagreb in August 2012. Cooperativa strives to empower individuals and groups from the independent sector in the countries of Southeastern Europe to strengthen their organizational capacities. Long-term objectives include creating a culture of shared best practices and knowledge transfer, and contributing to the implementation of cultural policies that ensure the sustainability of regional cooperation enterprises. For example, the Regional Cultural Action Laboratory is one such example, with priority given to the underdeveloped and underappreciated capacities of the independent cultural sector, especially in crisis and emergency situations, and to ad hoc campaigns geared towards strengthening local, regional, national, and international networking. Now, as one of the defining features of these cross-border alliances, collaboration is established and sustained within a circle of like-minded peers. My starting point here is that regional cooperation in this instance is manifested in coping strategies and practices of mutual support arising in response to conditions of heightened precarity and festering political divisions in the Balkans. Through the lens of new regionalism, I theorize regional cooperation as a civic virtue and a form of opposition to both ethno-nationalism and neoliberalism. It's indisputable that the increasing role and involvement of NATO, the EU, and other international entities in public policy and security governance in the last few decades have had a profound impact in the countries of the Western Balkans. I argue that, against this background, those involved in the Nomad Dance Academy and Cooperativa project a socialism rooted in their unique socio-historical context and improved with democracy. One of the main challenges, however, relates to the logic of EU membership and its implications. EU funding instruments for regional cooperation projects in the Western Balkans set different priorities for the region, to the effect that the need to engage in multilateral cooperation has become embedded in EU accession. In other words, to conform to the exigencies of the EU enlargement process is an imperative for the European future of the Balkans. Evidently, the process of EU integration involves substantial efforts and extensive reforms for both candidate and potential candidate countries. In addition, intertwined political and security interests give incentives to neighboring states to engage in mutual cooperation, albeit extrinsically motivated to a great degree en route to joining the EU. I start from the premise that a distinction should be drawn between top-down and bottom-up cross-border cooperation initiatives, as their socio-political consequences are quite different. The former are engineered from outside and devised to instigate a long-term peace-building process that hinges on collaboration with the EU and with very limited regional ownership, while the latter emanate from shared experiences and values of solidarity, as in the case of the two collaborative platforms considered here. Heads of governments and political elites in the countries of the Western Balkans, for whom integration into the EU sphere of influence is an obvious and necessary choice in this new geopolitical environment, have come to embrace interstate dialogue and cooperation to a large extent. This is particularly true in core policy areas such as trade, transport, infrastructure, agriculture, energy, and tourism, and dates back to the late 90s. But I ask a different kind of question of regional cooperation. How might regional cooperation be recruited as a force of opposition and resistance to both ethno-nationalism and neoliberalism? I'm interested in the ways in which the creative practitioners I consider here have deployed regional cooperation as a civic virtue integral to the socio-political order they aspire to create. Now, to summarize and conclude, today I've attempted to accomplish two tasks. The first is to unpack the significance of the Nomad Dance Academy and Cooperativa in the context of the post-war geography of the former Yugoslavia. The second goal is to show that the underlying premise of these two regional networking initiatives is based on consensus building through cooperation rather than on EU norms and standards. My overall aim is to propose that grassroots networks allow us to understand vital aspects of post-Yugoslav identification that ethno-national interpretive frameworks obscure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Amani. And finally, okay, we're pivoting to hybrid, so an exciting development. Christina, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Fabulous, thank you. And you're here, so that's good.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm delighted to conclude this panel with Joaquin Rodriguez and Christina Sala from UEA. And they're going to be speaking about cultural revitalization as a placemaking strategy in territories affected by environmental and armed conflict in Latin America. So let me get your presentation. And there we go. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. It's been a pleasure to be sharing with you this panel. I think there's so many ways in which we could create some links and conversation between along our topics. However, I'm going to be addressing things that we have in common through a different angle in this presentation. This is a presentation I'm sharing with Christina Sala, my great colleague and friend who I've been working with since 2018. She's a senior research associate in UEA. We've been working together in Colombia since 2018, and she's going to be sharing with us a little bit her experience, her current experiences in Guatemala, using an approach that we have been sort of developing together along some time. I mean, I started in Venezuela in some time back in my PhD, trying to explore how to engage with research in context of environmental conflict and armed disputes, by engaging with a dimension that is crucial for the people that we work with or study, which are indigenous peoples, the need to help use research to revitalize their own culture. And throughout the time that I've been working on this, I've realized that it's not only a need for indigenous peoples working on cultural revitalization. It's actually key for creating intercultural dialogues and the type of research that we carry out. So we're going to try to take you through a little bit of how we've been discovering this route. So I'm not going to be talking so much about the objects, about you know, the outputs, but I'm talking about the journey of how we do this research on conflicts through engaging with cultural revitalization as a need of the people that we work with. So I'm going to be doing the first part here with you, and then Christina will be joining us online with a case study that will actually illustrate what we're trying to say probably a little bit better. The main problem that we're trying to address through our work and why cultural revitalization is key is that, as many of you probably know, indigenous peoples in Latin America have a long history of protracted conflict. From our perspective, show an urgent need to develop processes that can help them rebuild, reconnect, and revitalize their own identities, knowledge, and sense of place, and to recover from processes of violence. And this is because, additional to the more evident effects of violence that we see in conflicts, such as displacement, criminalization, death, armed and environmental conflicts can also have a long-term effect, erasing people's identities and making invisible their knowledge systems. So what we have found through our research on conflict is that the indigenous peoples we work with are asking us for help and support in engaging with that dimension of invisibility of the knowledge systems. So I want to take you through a little journey of how we do this in research, that apparently the starting point is not to revitalize the identity and the knowledge systems of indigenous peoples. This is a transversal process, but it's key for how we do research. What we found, and I think I very much relate to your presentation before, what we found over the years working in conflicts is that a lot of the conflict transformation theory pays a lot of attention to engaging with the structural and relational aspects of conflict and trying to work out solutions to conflicts. So emphasizing elements that ultimately seek to strengthen the nation state. It's a very liberal approach to conflict transformation. It focuses on creating new structures, new governance structures, probably new forms of communication, building consensus, negotiation, but it tends to disregard and not pay attention to the cultural dimension of conflicts. And most importantly, to how those affected in conflicts are experiencing disruption to their knowledge systems. So we work a lot through our research in conflict and trying to address the cultural dimension through a particular research approach, and which I'll show you shortly. But this is the sort of things that I have encountered in my research since I did my PhD. This is an indigenous leader who I've been working with in Venezuela for a long time. When I started doing my PhD in Venezuela, in the south of Venezuela, in an area called Canaima National Park, I went to do study of conflicts to understand great complexity of different types of conflicts that take place in his area due to tensions between conservation and development. And I wanted to base myself in his community. And he said, studying, as you see in the slide, he says, studying conflicts is fine for you, but we don't have time. We need to act now. In 2 or 3 years' time, it might be too late for us. So you can stay in my community to base your research. If you help me in my village reflect about who we are and who we want to be in the future. We, the Pemon, don't know where we're going because all the projects that are being imposed in our territory, we're totally disoriented. We need to be clear about who we want to be, who we are and who we want to be as a people. This sort of realization and this request from this leader who I've been working with for a very long time has marked the way I do research and trying to bring in as much as I can a response to this request to really help to use research as a tool to revitalize knowledge beyond our academic interest in understanding conflicts, the conflicts that we study in our disciplines. This has been a recurrent theme in Bolivia many years later, while doing research on conflicts around forestry management. Similar requests from an elder called Miguel Supayave, who was very worried that his young people, he said, don't value the heritage that they have received from us, who have fought for a very long time to obtain legal rights over our territories. He claimed the young people are destroying the forest through community management projects that come from the outside, and worst of all, they're leaving us out, the elders who have fought for the territories, from even benefiting economically from this activity. And the claim from him and from his colleagues from the Council of Elders was, if we're going to do research with them, they required urgently that we worked with them on trying to help the young people reconnect with their territory. So it's not, it's something that we've seen throughout Latin America as we work. It's the same has happened in Bolivia. More and more people requesting that if we're going to do research with them, we really have in one way or another to engage with this dimension of cultural change. So our approach to placemaking, I want to make a distinction probably with the previous presentations, which is connected, but is in a way, is a particular research approach, is not capturing people's imagined geographies, but actually helping to articulate, reaffirm, and give visibility to living memories, to reaffirm the connection of people with place, which is critical for their survival in the context of war and conflict. So we see research itself as a process of placemaking. We're not studying how people, in a way it comes out, of course, but we're particularly interested in pushing the boundary of how we do research in a way that the research process itself can help to reconnect and make research relevant to those that are affected by violence. And we have over the time developed conceptualization of our research approach as well. Many people talk about action research. We like to think of it as a transformative action research process that involves thinking of research, of the research journey as an undisciplined process where we can actually build the line of the journey together with those that we work with. It's an intercultural approach where we actually have an interaction of knowledge systems. We don't come with the solutions. We actually build the process together. It's emotional because we connect with people's emotions, meanings to place. And we also recognize our emotions in the process because there is a solidarity towards people's injustices that we're trying to really engage with and solve and transform. And of course, this takes us to the action dimension of the research that we do. Just to give a little example of the projects, I'm not talking about projects that are specifically about resistance. I'm talking about projects that actually try to understand conflicts from different perspectives, from projects that have more focus on environmental issues to others that have actually focused on understanding people's peace-building strategies from the ground up. So this is 4 projects that Christina and I have been working where we have been trying to develop and jointly in one way or another involved in the construction of this research approach. All of the 3 last ones we have been developing in UEA. And the first one is when I started with this research approach in Venezuela in 1999. So it's a line of work that we've been building over time, and we have been trying to use our opportunity in the research process to develop, to connect with the production of outputs and processes that help to revitalize the need that people request for, in one way or another, when we do research on conflicts, environmental conflicts, or conflicts related to war, to make sure that there is an intention to engage with what those that we're working with request as a process of cultural revitalization. I'm not going to go into detail into all these 4 projects because it's huge. I would just want to give Cristina the opportunity to give us an illustration of how this process is done in reality. So she's going to be talking to us about her experience in Guatemala, where there's been some amazing work around risk recovery, and where they have been developing through cultural revitalization a really very important process for connecting disciplines that are trying to understand people's perception of risk. And the other 3 are examples of outputs that have come about in a process of joint research around environmental conflicts. The top one, which I just want to refer to quickly, is the first one that really got me going with this approach. Is the product of a long process of historical reconstruction in the Piedmont territory during my PhD, when I was studying conflicts. And in response to the chief's request that I quoted before, we developed a year-long process of joint community reflexivity about their past, their present, and their future, which culminated in this book. And the photo that you're seeing, it's a chuca. It's a ceremony that Piedmont carry out to protect from evil spirits any being, or it can be a person, it can be a thing. And they decided to do this ceremony to protect their book, which is the output of a long process of joint research about the cultural history of the Piedmont. It's the first book in Venezuela done by indigenous peoples about their own history. So I won't say any more. In the case of Bolivia, we've worked a lot as a response to the request from the elder, from Miguel Supayave, with historical reconstruction using participatory video and photo voice to help reconnect the youth to their territories, as part of our overall objective of understanding conflicts over forestry management in Bolivia. Colombia, we've been studying with nine community organizations from South Tolima, proposals from the ground up for peace building, and a group of women that are grouped together in a village called Herrera, decided to encapsulate their perception of peace building in that dress. It's a dress that, first of all, has the objective of recovering a traditional dress that was lost through the war in Colombia. The traditional dances have been stopped due to a very long history of armed conflict. So the first objective was to revive a dress, but also to embroider in the dress, as you can see, the history of their community, which has also been lost because the young people are moving out from their territories and they're trying to bring them back, and through culture as a force for revitalizing their identity and their culture. So those are 4 examples, but Cristina is going to tell us a little bit more or how this is done in practice. So Cristina, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Joaquina. Can you please help me with changing slides?
Yeah. So do you want
Okay.
to introduce yourself or say hi first? I don't know how to do this. Yes.
No, that's fine.
She's fine, but if you want to see her face, you can see her.
Yeah,
That would be nice.
I think I can make that happen. This one.
No, word. I think it's fine. It's just
okay.
for people to say hi.
Okay, switch back to the purple. There we go.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
You're just on the screen. Should we go? Should we start?
Yes, please.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Right.
So that one. Thank you. So now we are going to delve into a specific project, which is Ixchel, Building Understanding of the Physical, Cultural, and Socioeconomic Drivers of Risk for strengthening resilience in the Guatemalan Cordillera. Next, please. This project is a collaborative and interdisciplinary project that brings together approaches in physical sciences, social sciences, and humanities with the aim to improve resilience to hazards and disasters in Guatemala. Besides investigating landslides, debris flows, etc., it has carried out research with local communities. And UEA had led the work around understanding landscape and experiences of risk. And I have been the main researcher in the field for this work package. And other partners were the University of Edinburgh, University of Bristol, and Universidad del Valle de Guatemala. Next, please. Specifically, we have carried out research in the territory of Panabaj, which means land of stones. During the early morning hours of October 5th, 2005, the town was flooded in a landslide triggered by torrential rains associated with Hurricane Stan. The mayor of Santiago Atitlan declared it a cemetery, and the population therefore could not inhabit it anymore. Panabaj has no services, water, energy that could be provided by the municipality. However, most of the townspeople returned and the majority of the houses and stores were rebuilt. Some more context. The residents of Panabaj suffered during the 36-year-long Guatemala Civil War that ended in 1996. Next, please. Our general research question was, how does people's relationship with their territory affect their understanding of risk and the actions that may be developed to prevent it? Next, please. Besides the researchers from the universities, who has made possible this research process? Well, many members of the community of Panabaj, 2 women organizations, Anadesa and Maria Panabaj, COCODE, which is the local authority, and a group of wooden cutters. Next, please. We are a big team. And what the research process looks like? Well, both researchers from universities and co-researchers from communities participate in the design of the research process, which is a challenge itself. We use a variety of participatory tools, such as social cartography, which includes walks, drawing the territory with different aims, lots of drawings, interdisciplinary conversations, what we call dialogues of knowledge, but also arts-based tools, such as embroidery, painting murals, and I will dig more into this later on. Next, please. In order to explain how we approach the research process, I need to talk about a cumulative process that keeps growing through the research period, but also a linear process, which is the transformative path. For the cumulative process, the research started building community space of research. How? Letting them, the community, after having shared the purpose of the research process, letting the community set the research questions. It was the first time that the community was asked to participate in a research process as co-researchers, meaning that they are not objects of the research process, but subjects. Next, please. Next stage was responding to their research questions. For that, they decided to make some appointments with their abuelos, the ones who preserve the wisdom of the community. There is a generational gap in the community wisdom, the community knowledge since the Hurricane Stan. Next, please. At a moment, they started to make connections between the territory, the research process, their local knowledge, and their local arts. And they started to unfold their interpretation of the research process. Next, please. This is the embroidery that they wove that tells the story of sorrow, but also of light and hope. Next, please. This is one of the murals that the community of Panabaj has painted as a result of the research process to acknowledge their memories and their history. Next, please. And also I wanted to bring to you the book that woodcutters have created to share with children the need for preserving green areas. Next, please. And very briefly, this is our linear temporary transformative path that, of course, has been recreated backwardly. We started with a question that the community posted to us in October 2021, which was, which is my individual benefit? And then if we go through the linear transformative path, we see that by the end of August 2023, their affirmation was, we need to be united towards the defense of our territory. And we see that there is a transformation here all along the research process. I cannot really dig into these questions, but of course, if you have any question after the presentation. Next, please. It is then a linear process, but also a cumulative one. After more than 2 years, spaces for dialogues have been created towards transforming power relations. Next, please. Through all the activities carried out, the conversations, the meetings, the relationships, we have built a territory that has been resignified and their communities redignified. Their identities beyond the victims, from their roots, their knowledge, but also from love and from dignity. Their territory from the historical presence, from their sense and meaning of place, from the restitution of the links with the place, and from their vision of the future. And this is what I wanted to share with you from our insights from Guatemala. Thank you, Yoquine.
Thank you, Cristina. So just 2 more slides and we're finished. So what is the outcome for us from this type of research approach? First of all, is that the research approach is actually responding to demands that we get from those that we're working with. Their demand to make invisible other forms of knowledge in the research process, to produce outputs that are really meaningful to them and not just sort of articles or books that are read between us, but that actually respond to their needs and can help other people from the communities engage with the need to the cultural revitalization. But also, most importantly, from the perspective of this symposium, is the possibility of resignifying territory and reconnecting with place. And as Cristina hasn't really spoken about the complexities of the interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary dialogues that have taken place in her project. But in our experience, using this approach is key for creating more equitable spaces for dialogue with other actors that have interference or interests in the territories of those peoples that have been affected by war. So if you can start having a dialogue in the terms that matter to people, there's a much more possibility to having a more symmetrical relationships in that dialogue and for more transformative outputs and processes to take place. What is the potential contribution of our work on cultural revitalization to new area studies? Well, from our perspective, I think it helps to enhance ongoing conversations that I know are taking place about opening the focus of area studies beyond the interest of the nation state and movements, helping to rethink or to think a bit more beyond the interdisciplinary approach and talk more about transdisciplinarity, and to contribute to ongoing discussions about how to make the research relevant to those that are affected by ongoing complexities that the world is facing. Thank you so much. And we've just finished with a joy from the co-researchers from Guatemala that Cristina wanted to share with you, because she's very happy that when she started working with them, they were really very scared and hardly spoke. And after this research process, they're so happy and cheerful and relaxed. It's completely changed their sort of being as a result, and also of Cristina's. Thank you very much to all. Thank you, Cristina.
Wonderful. Thank you all. That's fantastic. Really wide-ranging panel with lots of points of commonality, I think, and potential interest. So we do have some time for questions. We have time for questions online as well, if anyone wants to submit one. Anyone want to go first? Yes, Francis, I'll bring you the microphone.
Thanks very much. A really very interesting set of papers. I've only got a question for Amani, really, and it's about money, because as we can see in much of Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, there's this kind of, if you like, corruption and co-optation of civil society by people, grant givers and that sort of thing. I don't think you mentioned where your dance academies are getting money, if they're getting money, and whether they're actually significantly disadvantaged by the sorts of people who are getting money for their particular, if you like, maybe not quite so Yugoslav nostalgic sort of initiatives.
Thank you very much for this question. I would say to start with, they had no money, and some of them even tried to get money even from sort of local governments and local councils, which was, I mean, this was always a question for me to them, that you can't continue without money, and especially when you actually need rooms to actually dance, and you need so it's interesting. When I started my PhD research, I started with groups that would just sit down and discuss theory, which cheap. I mean, it didn't cost them anything, and then they would have these conferences, and they didn't have to pay for the room that they were meeting in or anything, but there was a lot of that. And one of the groups I study is called walking theory, because in the end they realized they need to actually we need to do something with theory. We can't just sit down and just discuss, which was essentially quite cheap to do. And then they realized that when they need to actually reach out and do probably more performance or dance, then that obviously is going to come at a cost. And usually the money came from different pots. There was never a lot of money. Most of these people didn't get paid, so they just got money to actually book the venue, maybe fly somebody in. So there was always very, very little money. I have to say that later in the projects, they did get EU funding as well. So that was sort of, they did get funding from the Open Society Institute a fair bit, but their argument is what they're doing with this money is different. Obviously, one can always discuss that in more detail, but there's never a lot of money, and they're from one project to the next, and a lot of them actually get a lot disheartened, and sometimes they just leave the countries and then come back. So they live in precarity from one project to the next. And obviously at the time there was a certain historical moment, certain sort of things that were happening. Now the situation is very different. But yeah, the money was always a question, and it came from pots that I would say one can also dispute why you would take that money, but the argument was this: what we're doing with this money is different. So yeah.
Thank you. Can I say that I find that really fascinating panel? So thank you very much to all of our speakers. And I was surprised by some of the commonalities that emerged from it. And I hope that this can be built on later. But I just want to ask all of our panelists, and this actually builds a little bit on Francis's question. You were asking about the money, Francis, like where did the money come from? How do people get money? And we know that that's, yeah, who gets it? How do they get their hands on it? And it is really important. And I would like to relate that more than just the money, although the money is very important in terms of the outcome. But in terms of the use of policy and maybe being able to use the policy to people on the ground's benefit, policy interventions. And this is something I found in my own research in that, and it goes back to the question that Amani was asked about, and you mentioned about the difference between top-down interventions and bottom-up interventions from the community. One of the interesting things that I found in some of my pieces of research was that people on the ground were able to sort of wheedle their way into changing the policy interventions and the money which followed them from top-down interventions, but to use them to their own purposes. And that's something I'm wondering whether you have found that, Joaquina and Christina, whether you've been able to, I suppose, benefit from some interventions by abstracting the policies and changing them in ways that were to your own benefit. And just I'd be curious what people find in terms of that kind of use of policy and intervention and money, pots of money.
So in the case of Bolivia, well, it has not been so much money, but through this research that has involved other things apart from just, the output that you're seeing, which is the book and the photo voice process, is what happens when you start engaging with cultural revitalization is that you make the movement strengthens and has access to other levels of policy. So what happened in Bolivia was that actually through our research, and of course the combination of networks that started to be built along that, the Montage were able to produce a really important structural change in the legislation to move forward their autonomy claim to manage the territory. So it's not so much money, but it is transformative changes that really strengthen the governance of the territory. In the case of Colombia, we're actually working now the other way around. Rather than, we're actually in through impact funds that we've received from UEA, we've managed to open up pots of money that are there that haven't been thought of for strengthening cultural revitalization at the local level, the local governments, to start channeling funds to help supporting this particular organization that made the dress. So it's not that it's not that it changed the way that it was. Well, I suppose it is. It is yes. It is actually making it directing it in the way that they want to, but funds that are for national sort of peace building, but using it in that particular way in Colombia.
Anyone online want to jump in at all for that one? No? Okay, moving on. Edith?
Christina, sorry, did you want to say anything? Guatemala?
Just really interesting talks. Thank you very much. And I had to step out for a minute, so I might have missed a question or two. But I was wondering, just to add to what I have heard, are there groups that you've encountered, and not necessarily top down, but wanting to kill memory or cooperation? Did you encounter blowback from either gangs or state?
Yes, I mean, while I was doing my research there, I haven't encountered, but I was told about, for example, there was in 2008, some Serbian curator brought artwork from Pristina, Kosovo, and displayed it in a gallery in Belgrade, which is, I mean, brave, crazy, I don't know. But it's interesting because there weren't all the opening wasn't just disrupted by gangs. It was disrupted by well-known Serbian artists who thought that this was sacrilege. You can't do this. So there is a lot of strong opposition from other very well-known Serbian artists. This is why it was really, I mean, it's interesting. When I was doing fieldwork there, which was in 2012, I always, when I went to these events, I always noticed that the same people showed up. that it was always, the attendance here. After a while, you just got to know almost everybody who was, attending. So I think there was a lot of opposition, not just from sort of, the public, members of the public, but also from Serbian intellectuals and artists. And they, it's on video actually, how this exhibition was violently disrupted. Basically, this particular Serbian artist prevented from opening. He said, "You can't do that." And obviously there was a lot of hubbub outside as well. So yes, I mean, sometimes it's very difficult to discuss the topic of censorship in Serbia. And I say Serbia because this is mainly where I did my fieldwork actually. It's because, yes, there is censorship and there is not censorship. I mean, these projects were happening. Nobody necessarily was going to come and just storm into the auditorium and disrupt these initiatives that I discussed. But also they weren't popular. They weren't sort of well attended in that sense. But that I remember asking one of the curators about this, and she said, the audience will come, people will come, it's so yeah. So I think even though that there is no censorship in that sense at the time when I did my research, but also there were many risks that people were taking doing this.
No?
I can answer your question back later if you want, but I mean, or you want to say something? Well, in the case of Venezuela with the Pemon book, that has a tragedy outcome actually, because it is a delicate process when you have a process of cultural change and fractions with indigenous peoples themselves, and this is what they're actually. The demand for cultural revitalization is not only to help sort of confront external hegemonic powers. There are fractions within as well that are very complicated. And what happened with this book, which is a very powerful book that really made the Pemon stand out to the world of Venezuela, to the wider Venezuelan society, and say, "We're here. This is our culture. This is our identity." But the truth was that also there's a Pemon fraction that is very modernistic, more modern, that doesn't want to be Pemon in that way anymore. So that with time, the Pemon leader, his brother was murdered, his daughter was murdered, and his younger son was murdered by the Pemon fractions that are opposing this process of cultural revitalization. So it's tough. It's a tough process.
Thank you. One more? I
wanted to ask a question of Kone and Christina, because unfortunately I can't remember the name of the exact project, but it was one done in the United States among Indigenous Americans of essentially having younger population, Indigenous Americans, spend time with elders of their tribes so they could learn the language and revitalize that area of their culture. And I wanted to ask if you are doing anything similar in that way in your process to sort of revive individual languages, individual dialects, and using that as you go along your research, revitalizing that style of writing or oral traditions as well, which would which I think would be very useful in defining their own culture if they use their own language, rather than, let's say, a book in Spanish about Pemon culture has less impact possibly than written in, I'm struggling with the wording, sorry.
Christina, do you want to answer that or should I?
You can go first, and maybe I could add something if you like.
So so that what is important is that, we are not solving all the problems while we're there. But what is interesting is that the Montage in Bolivia, for instance, have through engaging with all this process of cultural revitalization, they have really embraced the urgent need for working on their language. So they have started a very strong process of revitalizing the language. It didn't happen because of us. It just added to a need that they knew they had. So they're doing a lot of the recovery of the Besito language. The Pemon don't. They still speak the language a lot. It's probably what maintains the culture alive. Interesting, when we produced the Pemon book, we did ask and consider publishing it in Pemon, and they said we don't want it written because our language is oral. It's much more confusing for us to read it because it has there's so many discrepancies about the phonetics. There's different interpretations on how it sounds. So they prefer to have their language in oral form. They want it in Spanish because they wanted the non-Pemon people to read it. So it's strategically useful for them in Spanish. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that for the time being. Cristina, how about you, and any insights about Guatemala?
Yes, thank you. Well, I could say that for the in Guatemala we work with Maya Sotujil community, and they speak Sotujil, and since the beginning, not since the beginning, but once they thought that books would be a good output for them to compilate their knowledge in a way, they decided to write the books both in Sotujil and in Spanish. So it's and for example, we are co-authoring a collective book which is gonna compile. It's the first book which is going to compile the history of Panabaj, and of course it needs to be written in Sotujil, not only in Spanish. So this is like just a bit of the things that we can do to help preserve languages.
The Montage decided to have their book in Besito as well, so we did translate it to Besito.
Dorothea, I can see you got your hand up. Do you want to jump in quickly to finish us off?
Yes, I just want to jump in for a second because I did my field research as a linguist on diglossia and bilingualism in Canada with the Hutterites. So they are speaking a very nice variant. It's just a dialect, so it's just an oral one. It's not written down, and they had the nice idea to preserve the language due to children books and things like that. So it was definitely not working out, because from one colony to the next one, they decided, no, that's wrong. It's not the variant we are speaking it. So there were children books produced to say, okay, that's our language, but they are not used to see it written down. So it always depends on the group you're doing the research on. As a researcher, as a linguist, you can directly say, okay, I'm doing my linguistic research on it, but I can't force the people if they don't want to write down it or have it in a special way conservated. So it's really interesting that every own group want to have it in their own way. And sometimes it lasts a very long time until you figure out, okay, in your cases, it's the Spanish one because you can really use it and people from outside can understand it as well. So you are much more open. Or you do it the other way around, that just you can understand it as a preservation for yourself. So it's a really, really interesting discussion. Thanks for that question.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think that's it for this panel. So thank you again to all our panelists for some fantastic papers. And yeah, thank you to our online panelists as well. And we will reconvene at 11:30. Thanks.